A quiet resolve. The soft chime of the boarding announcement echoed through the bustling terminal, a reminder that her journey was about to begin. Clara adjusted the light scarf around her neck, its soft texture a comforting contrast to the usual business attire that marked her identity. Today was different, though. Today, she was not Clara Weston, CEO of Westair. Today, she was just a passenger on one of her own flights, an anonymous face among many. This experience was something she had planned for months, and she felt a subtle thrill of anticipation. The airport's well-oiled machinery moved in seamless choreography as travelers filtered into various gates. Clara's mind wandered as she took her place in the boarding line, her thoughts drifting to memories of how her company had grown from a small regional airline into one of the most respected international carriers. It had taken years of hard work, tough decisions, and unwavering dedication. Yet, despite her success, she felt there was something missing. A true understanding of the passenger experience that numbers and reports couldn't provide. When Clara stepped onto the plane, she glanced around, appreciating the attention to detail in the first-class cabin. The seat upholstery, the dim lighting, the meticulously arranged magazines on each seat, all small elements she knew contributed to a luxurious experience. Her heart swelled with pride. This was her company's achievement. Settling into her seat, she breathed in the familiar scent of fresh leather and air conditioning, feeling a deep satisfaction at how far they'd come. As she adjusted her seat, a young flight attendant named Jessica approached, her smile tight, her eyes indifferent. Clara returned the smile warmly, noticing the slightest flicker of impatience in Jessica's expression as she moved on to the next passenger. She greeted each person with a tailored warmth that Clara herself didn't receive, making the sting of that subtle dismissal sharper than she'd anticipated. Clara reminded herself of her purpose. This was exactly what she wanted, to see the world from a different perspective, even if that meant facing the discomfort of being just another traveler. As Jessica returned with a tray of water, Clara quietly requested a glass, smiling again in an attempt to ease the attendant's apparent indifference. The response was a curt nod and a quick placement of the glass on the tray table, which caused a bit of water to spill. Clara reached instinctively for a napkin, but Jessica was already walking away, leaving her to clean up the minor mess alone. Clara blinked, momentarily stunned by the flight attendant's lack of courtesy. She resisted the urge to dwell on it, choosing instead to observe, reminding herself of the mission that had brought her here, to understand what it felt like to fly with Westair from a passenger's perspective, with no special privileges, no recognition, and no favors. As the plane taxied to the runway and took off, Clara leaned back, gazing out the window as clouds drifted past. She was fully immersed in the experience now, a little disappointed but also strangely motivated. She wondered if her employees knew just how much the little gestures, both positive and negative, impacted the passengers. Despite her vast experience and knowledge of the industry, this simple realization felt like a new insight. It wasn't long before Jessica came back down the aisle, this time carrying a pot of coffee. "Would you like coffee?" she asked, her tone lacking any warmth. Clara nodded politely. "Yes, please." The coffee pot hovered over her cup as Jessica poured without looking, spilling some of the scalding liquid onto Clara's hand and cheek. She gasped, recoiling instinctively as the hot coffee splashed across her skin, bringing a sudden, sharp pain. Jessica's only response was a terse "sorry" as she handed Clara a napkin, her gaze fixed elsewhere. Clara bit her lip, the sting of the burn dwarfed by the sting of Jessica's indifference. She dabbed at her cheek with the napkin, her fingers trembling slightly. The experience was shocking, not just because of the hot coffee, but because of the profound lack of empathy. Jessica seemed unfazed, moving on to the next row of passengers with a bright, friendly smile reserved for others. Clara felt a wave of disappointment, not only in Jessica's treatment, but in the realization of how deeply these small, everyday slights could impact a person's experience. A kind-faced man across the aisle leaned over, his eyes full of concern. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Clara managed a small smile, feeling her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "Yes, thank you. It was just an accident," she replied, downplaying the incident. She could see, however, that he wasn't convinced. He cast a quick, disapproving glance at Jessica before returning to his book, leaving Clara with a sense of gratitude. As the flight continued, Clara noticed the way Jessica's demeanor shifted depending on whom she interacted with. Her tone was polite and cheerful with certain passengers, particularly those who were young and well-dressed, while others, like herself, received only a terse nod and minimal eye contact. Clara couldn't ignore the growing ache in her heart as she watched this unfold. She had always believed her company was built on respect, inclusivity, and exceptional service for everyone. Yet here she was, witnessing a version of her company that she barely recognized. For the next few hours, Clara sat quietly, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. She didn't want to react out of anger or disappointment. She wanted to understand. Jessica's dismissive attitude was becoming increasingly painful, a constant reminder of her position as just another passenger. But Clara reminded herself that her presence here was meant to be a learning experience, and she wouldn't let her emotions cloud her purpose. As the flight neared its destination, Clara made a decision. Quietly, she signaled to another attendant, politely requesting to speak with the flight crew after they landed. The attendant seemed surprised by the unusual request but agreed, assuring her that she would make the necessary arrangements. Jessica, overhearing the exchange, shot Clara a look of mild curiosity, as if puzzled by her request. A short while later, Jessica stopped by Clara's seat with a forced smile that barely hid her irritation. "Is there an issue, ma'am?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. Clara met her gaze, keeping her expression calm. "No, not at all. I just think it might be valuable to have a discussion after the flight. Feedback is helpful, don't you think?" she replied gently. Jessica's eyes flickered with surprise, and she quickly nodded, clearly caught off guard by Clara's calm and unexpected response. "Of course, we're always open to feedback," she replied, her voice slightly stiff, a hint of apprehension creeping into her expression. Clara could sense Jessica's discomfort, but she refrained from saying anything further. She wanted the flight to end naturally, for Jessica to continue her job without the weight of knowledge hanging over her. Clara didn't want to teach her a lesson through confrontation. She wanted to show Jessica the real consequences of her actions, to make her understand how such a simple attitude adjustment could change someone's entire experience. As the plane began its descent, Clara remained in her seat, watching as Jessica moved up and down the aisle, her polite smiles once again reserved for those she deemed worthy. Clara's quiet resolve only strengthened as they touched down, the wheels hitting the tarmac with a soft jolt. She knew this meeting after the flight would mark a turning point, not only for Jessica, but for the standards and values that Clara hoped to uphold within her company. And as the plane rolled to a stop and passengers began to gather their belongings, Clara prepared herself for the quiet, steady confrontation that awaited. Jessica's dismissive attitude was about to meet Clara's unyielding resolve, and the future of her company's culture was, in a way, balanced on this very moment. Unveiling realities. Clara remained seated as the passengers began disembarking, the hustle and bustle of eager travelers retrieving their belongings filling the cabin. She observed Jessica as she assisted others, her demeanor unwaveringly pleasant for those she deemed important, and passably polite for others. Clara's quiet resolve had transformed into a calm, simmering clarity. The time had come to see this journey through and face Jessica directly. As the aisle cleared, another flight attendant, Erin, a soft-spoken, attentive young woman who had occasionally checked in on Clara with genuine concern during the flight, approached her. Erin offered a kind smile, noticeably different from Jessica's rehearsed expressions, and bent down slightly to speak privately. "Ma'am, the crew is ready for your feedback session. They're waiting in the front of the cabin. If you'd like, I can help with your bag as well," she said, gesturing to Clara's carry-on in the overhead bin. "Thank you, Erin," Clara replied warmly, appreciating the young attendant's attentiveness. She stood and collected her things, glancing at Jessica, who was still busy organizing items in the back of the cabin, unaware of the meeting that awaited her. Clara allowed herself a steadying breath before following Aaron to the front of the plane, where the cabin crew had gathered in a small private area near the galley. Jessica finally approached, wearing a wary, polite expression as she joined the rest of the crew. She shot Clara a quick, assessing glance, her curiosity barely concealed, but her professional facade remained intact. Clara noted the flicker of discomfort in Jessica's eyes, and while part of her wished to make the young woman's apprehension easier, she knew this conversation was necessary. The lead flight attendant, Mark, introduced himself and welcomed Clara, expressing appreciation for her willingness to provide direct feedback. Clara could sense that Mark was a steady leader, his demeanor calm and professional. He gestured to a nearby seat, inviting Clara to sit, and the rest of the crew gathered around, attentive and respectful. With a calm voice, Clara began. "First, I want to thank all of you for the hard work you put into making each flight a smooth experience. I know this job isn't easy, and the dedication required to deliver consistent service day in and day out is something I truly value." She paused, letting her words settle and watching their reactions. Most of the crew smiled, visibly grateful for her acknowledgement, while Jessica shifted slightly, crossing her arms, her expression unreadable. Clara continued, her tone steady, but her gaze settling firmly on Jessica. "I also think that it's important to acknowledge the smaller details that can make a world of difference in a passenger's experience. Today, as a passenger myself, I had the opportunity to observe how each of you interacts with travelers, how you balance warmth, attentiveness, and professionalism." She noticed Jessica's shoulders stiffen slightly, her gaze dropping. It was subtle, but Clara could see the weight of Clara's words beginning to register with the young flight attendant. Clara's approach was purposeful. She wanted Jessica to realize the impact of her actions without direct confrontation. "Aaron," Clara said, turning to the young woman, "I appreciated your kindness and consideration throughout the flight. You checked in, ensured that I had everything I needed, and made the experience more comfortable. You probably didn't know, but that attention made a difference." Erin beamed, her smile shy but appreciative. "Thank you, ma'am. It's part of my job, but I'm glad to hear it made a difference." Clara's gaze shifted back to Jessica, whose expression had turned carefully neutral, though there was a faint hint of color in her cheeks. Clara took a gentle but firm approach, knowing that calling out Jessica in front of the crew could be counterproductive. Instead, she addressed her words to the entire team. "On the other hand," she began softly, "it's equally important to remember that every passenger, regardless of appearance or demeanor, deserves the same level of care and respect. A warm smile, a genuine greeting, and attentiveness to even the smallest needs can change someone's entire perception of the journey. I learned today just how much these small gestures matter." Jessica's eyes lifted, meeting Clara's gaze briefly before looking away. The faint flush in her cheeks deepened, and she shifted uncomfortably, her posture defensive, but visibly impacted by Clara's words. Mark, the lead flight attendant, nodded, glancing at Jessica with a look of understanding and subtle encouragement. He sensed the message without Clara having to name Jessica outright. Good leaders knew when to let a lesson speak for itself. Clara continued, her tone calm, but with a purpose that was impossible to miss. "Today, I experienced moments of warmth and moments of indifference. I won't lie. Those moments of disregard felt surprisingly significant. It reminded me that we all carry a responsibility to embody the values we stand for, especially in service roles. No one here knows every passenger's story, but we should treat each person as though they have one." The weight of her words settled in the air, and Clara could sense the crew absorbing them. Some nodding in agreement, others glancing at Jessica, who stood silently, her gaze fixed on the floor. Clara could tell her words had hit their mark. Jessica's expression had softened, her rigid stance easing as the reality of her actions began to dawn on her. Clara decided to conclude the meeting without any direct reprimand. She wanted Jessica to process the lesson rather than feel punished. She didn't need to use her title or authority to reinforce her point. Jessica's own conscience would be enough. Instead, she closed the feedback session with a gentle but lasting message. I know you're all dedicated to your roles, and I want you to know that it shows. The little things you do, the kindness you share, and the patience you extend mean the world to people. You have the power to leave an impact that lingers long after they've left the plane. She met Jessica's gaze once more, her expression soft but steady. Thank you all for hearing me out, and thank you for making our passengers feel cared for. With that, she stood and thanked each crew member individually, shaking their hands and offering words of encouragement. When she reached Jessica, Clara held her hand briefly, meeting her eyes with a look of kindness rather than reproach. Jessica met her gaze, her own expression a mix of humility and realization. Thank you, ma'am, Jessica murmured, her voice barely a whisper. She looked genuinely contrite, her earlier confidence replaced by a humility Clara hadn't seen before. Clara gave her a gentle nod, hoping that this moment would be a catalyst for positive change. As Clara exited the plane and stepped into the bustling airport terminal, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew her decision to approach the situation with empathy rather than authority had been the right one. Jessica's actions had not been a result of malice, but rather a lack of awareness, a blindness to the power her small gestures carried. Outside the airport, Clara was met by her driver, who greeted her with a warm smile. She returned the smile, feeling a renewed sense of purpose for her company. Her experience as a passenger had given her insights that no report or feedback survey ever could. It was clear that, while her company was built on high standards, these values needed to be lived and reinforced continually, from the top down. In the car ride back, Clara pulled out her tablet, jotting down notes and ideas for upcoming training sessions and workshops. She was determined to infuse these lessons into the very core of her airline's culture, ensuring that respect and kindness were practiced consistently. Reflecting on the day's events, Clara found herself grateful for the uncomfortable moments. Those subtle stings of indifference had taught her the importance of humility and the profound impact of everyday interactions. She resolved to strengthen her company's commitment to creating meaningful passenger experiences, ones that honored each individual, regardless of their outward appearance or assumed status. Jessica's response had revealed the deeper truth Clara had sought. Change didn't come from a title or a position of authority. It came from connection, empathy, and a willingness to see every person as valuable. In that, Clara felt she had achieved something far more significant than her original goal of understanding the passenger experience. She had glimpsed the heart of what her airline could and should be, a place where every journey was not only comfortable and safe but genuinely human. As the city lights blurred past her window, Clara leaned back, feeling a quiet, profound sense of fulfillment. She knew this journey was just beginning, and she was ready to see it through. Unmasking layers. Clara sat quietly in the lounge, her mind lingering on Jessica and the experience she had just undergone. As she reflected, her curiosity about the young flight attendant grew. There was something about Jessica's attitude, a subtle but palpable tension, that hinted at deeper layers. Clara felt compelled to understand the root of Jessica's behavior, knowing that addressing only the surface would be a temporary solution. If she was to make real change within her company, she needed to understand the people within it. Clara had already arranged for an extended layover in this city, wanting to immerse herself in the airline's day-to-day operations. She had planned to review various aspects of the company, from customer service to logistics, as a true insider on the ground. Today, however, her focus was sharpening on the employees and their interactions. An impromptu meeting with a member of her human resources team seemed like the logical next step. After a brief call, she secured a quiet meeting space in a nearby office. The HR representative, Mia, was a sharp, observant woman in her mid-30s with a friendly demeanor and an innate professionalism. She greeted Clara with a respectful handshake, but Clara quickly diffused any formality. "Please, "Mia, let's keep this informal. I just want to have an open conversation." Clara began, settling into a chair across from her. Mia nodded, visibly relaxing. "Of course, Clara. How can I assist you today?" Clara explained her experience on the flight, describing the subtle coldness and outright dismissive gestures she had observed from Jessica. As she spoke, Maya listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. Once Clara finished, Maya sat quietly, collecting her thoughts before responding. "First, I want to thank you for your hands-on approach. Not every executive would take the time to experience the company from this perspective," Maya said, her voice tinged with respect. "Jessica's behavior is disappointing to hear about, but it's unfortunately not unheard of. We've been receiving some complaints from passengers about similar incidents lately, though the feedback is often vague and not specific enough for us to take action." Clara frowned, absorbing this new piece of information. Do we know what might be causing these issues? Are our flight attendants struggling with something specific? Mia leaned forward, choosing her words carefully. "Well, I've been noticing an uptick in stress among the crew. Over the past year, as we expanded our routes and brought on new hires, there's been more pressure on the attendants. Some of the more experienced crew members, like Jessica, seem to feel that they're bearing the brunt of the workload. There's also the issue of subtle biases, as you've experienced, though it's rarely as overt as it was today." Clara absorbed Mia's insights, the puzzle pieces slowly fitting together. Jessica's behavior, while unacceptable, wasn't necessarily born from indifference alone. If there was an underlying frustration or sense of burnout, it was likely influencing her actions more than she consciously realized. "I appreciate your perspective, Mia. It sounds like there's a deeper issue here, something that goes beyond just a few individual cases," Clara said thoughtfully. "But how can we address it effectively? I don't want temporary fixes. I want a solution that nurtures a lasting culture of respect and empathy." Mia nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "A lot of companies conduct workshops and mandatory training sessions, but in my experience, those can feel superficial if they're not part of a larger cultural shift. What we need, Clara, is to foster empathy and patience across all levels. If flight attendants are burned out, we have to support them in ways that are tangible, not just policy on paper." The words resonated with Clara. She had long believed in the importance of leading with empathy, but today's experience had underscored just how essential it was to integrate that belief throughout the company. This wasn't just about one flight or one interaction. It was about building an environment where every employee felt valued, understood, and empowered to pass that respect on to passengers. Mia continued, "One of the ideas I've been considering is implementing peer mentorship. Pairing newer flight attendants with more experienced ones could foster camaraderie and alleviate some of the pressure on senior staff like Jessica. We'd also get a chance to train new hires in a way that reinforces our values through example." Clara leaned forward, her interest piqued. "I like that idea, Mia. I think it would be beneficial for both the new hires and the veterans. It could be an opportunity for them to reconnect with why they joined this industry in the first place." Encouraged by Clara's enthusiasm, Mia smiled. "Additionally, I think we should have more accessible wellness resources, mental health days, counseling options, even wellness workshops. The demands of this job are constant, and if our team members don't feel supported, it's natural that it might affect their interactions with passengers." Clara nodded in agreement, already envisioning the positive changes these initiatives could bring. "I couldn't agree more. I want everyone at West Air to feel that they're not just part of a company, but part of a community that values them as individuals." Their conversation continued, diving deeper into specific strategies, from regular empathy training sessions to monthly feedback meetings where crew members could voice concerns. By the end of their discussion, Clara felt invigorated, the disappointment of the morning now transformed into a purposeful drive to bring positive change. As she left the office, her thoughts returned to Jessica. Despite her initial frustration with the young flight attendant, Clara now felt a flicker of understanding. Jessica, like many others, was likely facing her own challenges, unseen and unacknowledged. Perhaps she had simply lost sight of the bigger picture, becoming entangled in the daily demands and stresses of the job. Clara resolved to reach out to Jessica again, this time with a focus on empathy rather than criticism. Later that evening, Clara arranged a private meeting with Jessica. She kept the atmosphere informal, choosing a quiet cafe where they could speak openly without the constraints of an office environment. Jessica arrived looking slightly apprehensive, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a sense of vulnerability. Clara greeted her warmly, offering a seat and a comforting smile. Jessica accepted with a hesitant nod, her eyes flickering with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. After they ordered, Clara leaned forward, her tone gentle. "Jessica, I wanted to speak with you today, not to reprimand you, but to understand more about your experience. I could sense during the flight that you were carrying some tension, and I'd like to hear about what you're going through." Clara began, watching Jessica's expression soften slightly. Jessica hesitated, looking down at her coffee before responding. "Honestly, I wasn't expecting this. I thought you might be here to criticize me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara shook her head. "That's not my intention at all. I genuinely want to understand what it's like for you and the other attendants. You see, I believe that every interaction we have with passengers reflects something deeper within us. If there's something affecting your well-being, I want to know about it so we can address it together." Jessica's shoulders seemed to relax as she took a deep breath, as if releasing a burden she had carried for too long. She finally met Clara's gaze, her expression raw and honest. "It's been difficult," she began slowly, her voice steady but tinged with weariness. "With the new routes, we're constantly on the go, and it feels like we barely have time to rest before we're back in the air. I've been working back-to-back flights, and sometimes I feel like I'm stretched too thin. It's hard to maintain that level of warmth and friendliness when you're exhausted, you know." Clara nodded, her heart aching as she listened to Jessica's words. "I can only imagine how challenging that must be, Jessica. I understand that physical and emotional exhaustion can have a huge impact on how we treat others, even if we don't intend it to." Jessica seemed encouraged by Clara's understanding and continued, "I think, over time, I started to lose sight of why I joined this industry in the first place. I used to love meeting new people, hearing their stories, and making them feel comfortable. But lately, it feels more like a job, like something I'm just trying to get through. And I know that's not right." Clara placed a comforting hand on Jessica's arm. "Thank you for being so honest with me. I truly appreciate it. What you're feeling is valid, and it's something I think many of our team members might be experiencing." Jessica's eyes glistened as she offered a tentative smile, visibly moved by Clara's empathy. "I didn't realize that anyone cared to listen. I thought I was just another employee, that no one would notice if I was struggling." Clara's heart ached at the admission. "That's exactly what I want to change, Jessica. You're not just another employee. You're a part of West Air, and every person here matters to me. I want us to work together to create an environment where you and everyone else feel valued, supported, and inspired to make each flight a positive experience." The conversation continued, flowing naturally as Jessica shared more of her challenges, her frustrations, and her dreams. Clara listened attentively, genuinely invested in understanding the young woman before her. By the end of their meeting, Jessica's expression had softened, her confidence rekindled with a renewed sense of purpose. As they prepared to leave, Clara offered Jessica one final thought. "Remember, Jessica, kindness and empathy are powerful tools. They don't just change the lives of those we serve, they transform us too. And I believe that, together, we can make West Air a place where everyone feels that transformation." Jessica nodded, her eyes brimming with newfound resolve. "Thank you, Clara. I won't forget this. I'm ready to do my part." Watching Jessica walk away, Clara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had entered this journey seeking to understand her passengers' experience, But what she had gained was something far more meaningful, a glimpse into the heart of her company and a deeper connection with the people who made it thrive. This was only the beginning, Clara knew. The path to genuine change was long, but she was prepared to walk it, step by step, alongside her employees, nurturing a culture of empathy, respect, and humanity. With a smile, Clara turned and left the cafe, her heart brimming with purpose, ready to lead West Air into a new era, planting seeds of change. Clara returned to her hotel room that evening, her mind filled with the meaningful conversation she'd shared with Jessica. She had begun this journey expecting to encounter the usual operational challenges and to perhaps refine a few service protocols, but her experience was shifting her focus. The real challenge she now saw lay in the human element, the heart and soul of West Air. Clara had to create a culture that didn't just speak of empathy and respect, but lived it fully. She sat at the small desk in her room, her tablet open, making notes on the new ideas and initiatives she discussed with Mia and Jessica. Training programs, mental health resources, mentorship programs. These were all part of the vision. But Clara knew that if these initiatives were to succeed, they needed to be woven deeply into the company's DNA, not just introduced as one-time fixes. She wanted West Air to be a place where everyone felt seen and valued, a company that inspired not only passengers, but the people who worked there. The next day, Clara arranged a meeting with the executive team, most of whom were surprised to find her already at the regional headquarters, as her visit had been initially unplanned. Clara's executive team, a group of experienced professionals who had worked alongside her to shape West Air's growth, knew her as a visionary leader with a strong focus on innovation and quality. However, today, Clara intended to show them another side of her vision, commitment to fostering genuine human connection and support within the company. As she gathered them in the sleek conference room, her tone was uncharacteristically informal. "Thank you all for meeting with me on such short notice. I know this visit wasn't on the agenda, but something has come up that I believe is essential to discuss. It's about our employees, particularly our flight attendants, and how we're supporting them in their roles." The executives looked at her curiously, a few exchanging glances, sensing the unusual weight behind her words. Clara leaned forward, her hands folded on the table. "Yesterday, I flew as a regular passenger on one of our flights," she began. "I went without any special treatment, no announcements, no perks. My goal was to experience our service as any other traveler would." The executives nodded, a few murmurs of approval echoing around the table. Clara continued, her voice steady but warm. "What I encountered was, frankly, eye-opening. I experienced both kindness and indifference from our flight attendants, depending on who was serving me. And what struck me the most was how much these small gestures, both positive and negative, impacted the overall experience. I felt firsthand the power that a smile or a kind word could hold, and conversely, how a cold dismissal could diminish that feeling of care." The room fell silent as the executives absorbed her words, each one considering the implications of her experience. Clara knew this was the moment to lay the foundation for the change she wanted to implement. "I spoke to one of our attendants, Jessica, who had displayed some challenging behavior during the flight," Clara went on, choosing her words carefully. "But after our conversation, I began to understand the strain and stress she was under. Jessica, like many of our team members, is struggling with burnout and has started to lose sight of the purpose behind her work. This is not her failure alone. It's a signal that we need to do more to support our team." A few executives nodded, their expressions thoughtful, while others seemed surprised at Clara's level of insight into the daily challenges faced by the staff. She sensed both empathy and reservation in the room, but she pressed forward. "I don't want to be the kind of company that addresses these issues with quick fixes or standard training sessions," Clara said, her tone firm. "We're talking about a cultural shift here. I want West Air to be a company that genuinely cares about its employees' well-being. Our people need to feel valued, supported, and inspired. They need to feel as if they're a part of something meaningful, not just a cog in a machine. She outlined the initiatives she and Mia had discussed, emphasizing the need for a structured mentorship program, wellness resources, and empathy-based training sessions that went beyond mere customer service techniques. She wanted workshops that focused on emotional intelligence, stress management, and the power of kindness, not just for passengers, but for each other. One of the senior executives, David, spoke up. "Clara, this sounds like a noble goal, but it also sounds costly. These kinds of programs require ongoing investment. I worry about how much of this we can realistically implement without impacting our bottom line." Clara looked at David, appreciating his pragmatism. "I understand, David, but think of it this way. Our employees are our front line. They're the face of West Air. When they feel supported, they deliver better service. When they're burned out, that service suffers. In the end, investing in our people isn't a cost, it's a return. If we want passengers to feel valued, our team members need to feel valued first." Another executive, Sarah, who managed employee engagement, chimed in. "I agree with Clara. Employee retention and satisfaction are crucial, especially in the service industry. If we can prevent burnout, we're likely to see a decrease in turnover, which will save on hiring and training costs in the long run. Plus, happier employees mean happier passengers." Clara nodded, grateful for Sarah's support. She could see that others were beginning to understand the vision she was laying out. Slowly, the atmosphere in the room shifted from cautious to inspired, as the team began to see the potential impact of this cultural shift. "Thank you, Sarah," Clara said, her voice filled with encouragement. "I know this will be a significant change, but I believe in our team's ability to rise to this challenge. We are not just an airline. We are a community. And that community needs to be grounded in compassion and respect for each other." With the team now more receptive, Clara outlined her plan for rolling out these initiatives in phases. First, they would begin with a series of workshops focused on empathy and active listening, bringing in experts to guide these sessions. The wellness resources would follow, including counseling services, mental health days, and an anonymous feedback system that would allow employees to voice their concerns without fear of repercussion. The mentorship program, a more long-term project, would take root once the initial changes were in place. Clara wanted to foster a support network within the company, pairing experienced employees with newcomers to help them navigate the demands of their roles with guidance and camaraderie. As the meeting wrapped up, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose and excitement. Her team was on board, understanding that this cultural evolution would not only uplift their employees, but strengthen the brand and mission of West Air. But even as she left the conference room with her plans in motion, she knew that the work was far from over. Later that afternoon, Clara scheduled a visit to the Employee Training Center at the regional headquarters. She wanted to see firsthand how new recruits were being trained and to assess where she could integrate her new ideas. The training center was bustling with activity, with groups of new hires gathered around instructors, learning about everything from safety procedures to customer service skills. As Clara observed a customer service workshop, she noticed an instructor leading the trainees through a series of role-playing exercises. The scenarios covered common issues, such as dealing with a delayed flight or handling a frustrated passenger. But Clara realized that something was missing: the empathy factor. She stepped forward, introducing herself to the instructor and the group of wide-eyed trainees. "Mind if I join you all?" she asked with a warm smile. The instructor welcomed her, and Clara quickly took charge of the session. "I know you're learning about the technical aspects of service, and that's important," she began, addressing the group. "But there's something I want to add, something I've learned recently. Providing excellent service isn't just about resolving issues. It's about understanding the person in front of you." She scanned the room, noticing the mix of curiosity and nervousness in the trainee's eyes. "Every passenger has a story," Clara continued. "They might be anxious because they're traveling for a job interview, or heartbroken because they're flying to say goodbye to a loved one. And just as they each have a story, so do you. You're all here because you have a reason for being a part of this industry. Maybe it's your love of travel, maybe it's your passion for helping others, or maybe it's something as simple as wanting to bring a little kindness into the world. The trainee's expressions softened, and Clara could feel the atmosphere shift, a sense of shared understanding forming in the room. To truly serve others, you need to connect with that purpose, and you need to remember that every interaction is an opportunity to make a difference, she said, her voice resonant with sincerity. Service isn't just about solving problems. It's about caring for people, even if it's only for the few hours they're in your care. When you carry that intention, passengers feel it. And I believe that's what will set Westair apart. The trainees nodded, visibly inspired, and Clara could sense that her message had reached them. The instructor, too, looked moved, and she made a mental note to integrate Clara's insights into future sessions. As Clara left the training center, a profound sense of accomplishment filled her. She had begun to plant seeds that she hoped would blossom into a new culture at Westair, a culture grounded in empathy, understanding, and a genuine commitment to each person's well-being. Clara knew the path ahead would be challenging. True transformation required patience, perseverance, and unwavering dedication. But she also knew that Westair was on the brink of something extraordinary, something that could redefine what it meant to be an airline. And with each step she took, Clara felt her vision for Westair drawing closer to reality. Building bridges across the divide. As Clara left the training center, she felt the weight of her vision growing both exhilarating and humbling. There was so much potential in her employees, a reservoir of passion and humanity that, if channeled correctly, could make Westair not just a successful airline but a pioneer in compassionate service. However, Clara understood that to sustain such change, it would take more than training sessions or new initiatives. She needed to foster a community within the company itself, one that would carry this ethos forward naturally, spreading from one team to another like roots deepening in the soil. The next morning, Clara arranged a gathering in a large open conference room at the regional headquarters. She invited employees from various departments, customer service representatives, flight attendants, maintenance crew, ground staff, and pilots. Her goal was to create a space where everyone, regardless of role or rank, could come together and share their experiences, voice their thoughts, and understand each other's perspectives. She stood at the front of the room as employees slowly filed in, some looking curious, others skeptical. Clara could see Jessica among them, standing quietly by the doorway with a hesitant expression. Clara met her gaze, offering a warm smile and a small nod, which seemed to ease the young woman's tension. As the room filled, Clara took a moment to appreciate the diversity of backgrounds and experiences that her employees represented. This was the heart of Westair, each person bringing something unique to the company's story. Once everyone had settled, Clara addressed the group. "Thank you all for joining me today. I know some of you may wonder why we're here, and I understand if you feel unsure. But I want to make something very clear. This is your space, a place where your voices matter." A few heads nodded, others shifted in their seats. Clara could sense the tentative curiosity in the room, a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just another corporate meeting. "Today, I don't want to talk at you. I want to hear from you," she continued. "I believe each of you has a story, a reason why you're here, working in this industry, facing the challenges that come with it. And I believe that by sharing our stories, by understanding what each of us goes through, we can build a stronger foundation of respect and empathy within our company." Clara looked around, her eyes encouraging each person in the room. "I'd like to start with a simple question. Why do you do what you do? What brought you to Westair?" For a moment, silence filled the room as everyone looked at one another, unsure who should speak first. Finally, a young ground crew worker named Sam raised his hand, his voice quiet but resolute. "I work in ground operations," he began, clearing his throat. I've always loved planes. I used to watch them take off and land from a little hill by the airport when I was a kid. And even though I'm not flying them, being part of the process, knowing that I'm keeping passengers safe, that makes me proud. My daughter, she tells all her friends that her dad makes sure the planes don't fall out of the sky." He chuckled softly, his face lighting up with a hint of pride. A few people smiled, and Clara nodded, grateful for Sam's courage to speak up. She could feel the atmosphere in the room beginning to shift, as if the group was shedding an invisible layer of reserve. Next, a customer service agent named Priya spoke up, her voice more hesitant but steady. "I didn't plan to work at an airline," she admitted, a little sheepishly. "I was an art major in college, and this job was supposed to be temporary. But over the years, I found that helping people, especially when they're stressed or upset, became something I actually cared about. I learned that when I'm calm and kind, it can really change someone's day. I guess, in a way, I get to be a small piece of someone's journey." Clara watched the reactions of the other employees, noticing the small nods and smiles as Priya spoke. It was clear that her words resonated. Jessica, who had been sitting quietly near the back, shifted in her seat, her face thoughtful as she listened. Encouraged by the positive responses, more employees began to open up, each sharing pieces of their personal journeys, challenges, and aspirations. A flight attendant spoke about her passion for travel and connecting with people from around the world. A pilot talked about his childhood fascination with flying and the responsibility he felt to keep passengers safe. Gradually, walls began to fall as people connected through shared experiences, a collective sense of purpose starting to emerge. Finally, Clara looked toward Jessica, sensing that the young woman had something to share but was holding back. She gave Jessica an encouraging smile, nodding subtly in her direction. Jessica hesitated, glancing around the room, but then took a deep breath and spoke. "I became a flight attendant because I wanted to see the world," she admitted, her voice wavering slightly. "I thought it would be glamorous and exciting, like in the movies, but the reality was different. There are days when I feel so tired, like I'm just going through the motions. I didn't mean to lose sight of why I started, but it happened gradually. And I know I've treated some people unfairly, passengers, and maybe even some of you." The room fell silent as Jessica's words settled. Clara watched as her colleagues looked at her, their expressions not of judgment but of understanding. Jessica's vulnerability created a powerful moment, a rare instance where honesty had bridged the divide between frustration and empathy. "I'm sorry," Jessica continued, her gaze dropping. "I know I need to do better, but sometimes it just feels overwhelming." Clara stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. It takes courage to be so honest, and I think many of us can relate to what you're feeling." She turned to the rest of the room, addressing everyone. "Jessica's story isn't unique. Many of us have felt overwhelmed, maybe even disillusioned. But I believe that by supporting each other, by sharing these struggles openly, we can regain that sense of purpose and pride in our work." Clara then shifted the conversation to the changes she wanted to implement, sharing her vision for the mentorship program, wellness initiatives, and the ongoing empathy workshops. She made it clear that these changes weren't just for optics. They were the foundation of a new culture that she wanted each employee to help build. She encouraged everyone to think about how they could contribute, not only to their own well-being but to the well-being of their colleagues and the passengers they served. As the meeting wound down, Clara invited the employees to share any suggestions or ideas they had for supporting each other. To her surprise, a maintenance worker raised his hand, a burly man with a thick beard named Mike, known for his no-nonsense attitude. "Maybe we could have a buddy system," he suggested gruffly, his voice tinged with a hint of shyness. "You know, like we do in the military. Someone you can check in with on a tough day, maybe even switch shifts with if you're really struggling." Clara smiled, appreciating the simplicity and effectiveness of his idea. "That's a great suggestion, Mike. A buddy system could be a wonderful way for everyone to feel supported, especially on challenging days. We'll look into setting that up." Jessica raised her hand again, looking slightly more confident this time. What if we had a pass-it-on program? She suggested. Something where we could anonymously leave little notes or treats for each other. Just small things to brighten someone's day or show appreciation. Sometimes knowing that someone cares, even in a small way, can make a difference. Clara's face lit up at the suggestion. I love that idea, Jessica. A pass-it-on program could remind us all to look out for one another. Let's make it happen. The room buzzed with excitement as other employees chimed in with more ideas. The meeting transformed from a simple gathering into a brainstorming session, with each person contributing ways to foster a more caring and connected environment. Clara could feel a powerful momentum building, a sense that these initiatives weren't just corporate policies, but part of a new, shared vision for what West Air could become. As the gathering came to an end, Clara thanked everyone for their openness and contributions. She could see that many of them left with renewed energy and purpose, exchanging smiles and ideas as they walked out of the room. Clara stayed behind, savoring the silence and reflecting on the profound impact of the meeting. She felt deeply grateful, knowing that she had taken the first steps toward real, lasting change. Later that evening, Clara sat in her hotel room, her heart full with the knowledge that something truly significant was unfolding. West Air was no longer just an airline. It was evolving into a family, a community where each member was seen, valued, and supported. And that, Clara knew, was worth more than any business milestone or profit margin. Before turning in for the night, she opened her tablet and sent an email to her entire team. Subject: A new beginning for West Air. Dear team, today, I had the privilege of hearing many of you share your stories and experiences. Your honesty, courage, and commitment have deeply inspired me, and I want you to know that I am more determined than ever to make West Air a place where each of us feels valued and supported. We are embarking on a new chapter together, one grounded in empathy, kindness, and understanding. This journey will not be easy, and we may face challenges along the way. But I believe in each of you. Together, we can create an airline that isn't just known for its flights, but for its heart and soul. Thank you for your trust, your dedication, and your belief in this vision. Let's build something beautiful together. With gratitude, Clara Weston. As she pressed send, Clara felt a sense of peace and purpose that filled her with quiet joy. The seeds had been planted, and with time, patience, and a collective effort, she knew they would grow into something truly remarkable. The ripple effect. Weeks passed since Clara's transformative journey on her own airline. The initiatives she'd set in motion began to take root, subtly at first, like seeds germinating just beneath the surface. But as they grew, the changes became visible, spreading across West Air's network and reshaping the culture from within. Employees from every corner of the company were starting to feel the impact, and the atmosphere was palpably different, filled with a renewed sense of purpose and camaraderie. Clara, too, felt a profound shift. She had always loved her work, but now, her connection to West Air was deeper, more personal. She spent more time walking through the terminals, speaking to employees, and meeting with crew members before flights. She wanted to make sure they knew she wasn't just a distant executive in a corporate office, but someone who understood their experiences and valued their contributions. Every interaction, no matter how brief, was an opportunity to reinforce the culture she was nurturing. One morning, Clara walked into the regional headquarters to find a scene that filled her with quiet pride. In the lobby, a board labeled "Pass It On" had been set up. A simple corkboard with small notes pinned in rows. Each note was a message of encouragement, gratitude, or kindness from one employee to another. A handwritten note caught her eye. "Thank you to the maintenance crew for keeping us safe on every flight. You're the heroes behind the scenes." Clara smiled, realizing that this idea, born from Jessica's suggestion, had taken off faster than she'd anticipated. It had started as an experiment but quickly blossomed into a cherished tradition. Employees from every department now used the board, leaving notes for each other, celebrating birthdays, offering words of encouragement on tough days, and expressing gratitude for the smallest of gestures. The effect was contagious. Kindness was becoming part of the company's very fabric. As Clara admired the board, she noticed Mia, the HR representative, approaching with a smile. "Clara, good morning." Mia greeted warmly, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "I was hoping to find you here. I wanted to share some updates on the programs we've implemented. We're seeing an incredible response." Clara turned to her with interest. "That's wonderful to hear, Mia. Tell me more. How's everything going?" Mia's face lit up. "Well, the mentorship program has been a resounding success. We paired senior crew members with newer hires, and it's already making a difference. Some of the seasoned employees admitted that it's reminded them why they started in the first place, and the new hires feel so supported. They're more confident and better prepared." Clara nodded, satisfaction filling her. "That's exactly what I'd hoped for. It's amazing how mentorship can be just as rewarding for the mentors as it is for the mentees." Mia continued, "And that's not all. The wellness initiatives have been incredibly popular. Employees are actually using the counseling services and wellness days, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. It's clear that these resources were long overdue." Clara listened, heartened by the news. She knew these changes were just the beginning, but the early results confirmed that her vision was resonating. People were feeling seen and valued, and that shift was creating a ripple effect across the entire organization. Suddenly, Clara noticed Jessica entering the lobby, her demeanor different from the wary, defensive woman she'd first encountered. She looked more at ease, her posture relaxed, her eyes bright with a newfound confidence. Clara caught her gaze and waved her over. "Good morning, Jessica." Clara greeted her warmly. "How are you finding things lately?" Jessica's face broke into a genuine smile. "Honestly, Clara, it's been a game changer. The mentorship program especially. I'm actually mentoring one of the new hires, and it's reminded me of why I joined Westair. Being able to pass on what I've learned has given me a new perspective." Clara's heart swelled with pride. "I'm so glad to hear that, Jessica. It sounds like you've really embraced this new role." Jessica nodded, her expression growing thoughtful. "I realized that I had lost sight of what this job could mean, not just to the passengers but to the people I work with. Seeing the impact we have on each other, it's been humbling." Clara smiled, her own eyes softening. "That's exactly the spirit I hoped to see spread through Westair. Every person here plays a part in creating a supportive environment, and I'm so proud to see you leading by example." Jessica's face flushed with gratitude, and she nodded before stepping aside to greet other colleagues who had joined the morning's gathering. As Clara watched, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Jessica had transformed, not just in her behavior, but in her outlook. And she wasn't alone. Across the company, employees were reconnecting with their purpose, rediscovering the joy and pride they took in their work. Later that month, Clara received an email from a passenger who had recently flown with Westair. It was addressed to her personally, an unexpected but welcome surprise. The email read, "Dear Ms. Weston, I recently flew with Westair from New York to San Francisco, and I wanted to share my experience with you. I'm not normally one to write letters to CEOs, but this flight was different. From the moment I boarded, I felt a warmth and care from the crew that I've rarely experienced on any airline. During the flight, I was seated near a young man who seemed anxious and uncomfortable. I later learned that it was his first time flying, and he was nervous. One of your flight attendants, a young woman named Jessica, noticed his distress. She spent extra time talking to him, calming his fears, and checking in on him throughout the flight. She didn't just treat him as a passenger, she treated him as a person. By the end of the flight, the young man looked calm and even smiled, thanks to Jessica's kindness. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to him. And to me, watching from the next row over, it made me realize that Westair is not just an airline. It's a community. I don't know what you've done to foster this culture, but I wanted to let you know it's working. Thank you for creating a space where people matter. With gratitude, Sarah M." Clara sat back in her chair, rereading the email with a sense of deep satisfaction. It was a testament to the fact that the change she'd envisioned was not only taking root, but beginning to blossom. The transformation was real, not just in Jessica, but in the passengers who felt the ripple effects of every act of kindness and empathy. This feedback invigorated Clara even further. She wanted to celebrate these small but significant successes and reinforce the impact of their efforts. She called a company-wide meeting, a virtual gathering that included employees from all departments, from pilots to ground crew, so everyone could witness the progress they had collectively achieved. On the day of the meeting, the company's video platform buzzed with activity as hundreds of employees logged in, their faces filling the screen. Some at home, others at the office, and a few in airport break rooms. Clara greeted them warmly, her presence radiating pride and genuine joy. "Hello, West Air family," she began, her voice resonant with enthusiasm. "Today, I wanted to take a moment to reflect on the journey we've been on together these past few months. I know that change isn't always easy, and I want to thank each of you for embracing this new chapter with open hearts." Clara shared the letter from the grateful passenger, her words met with smiles and nods of pride. She noticed Jessica's face on the screen, her expression a mix of happiness and humility as she realized her kindness had left such a lasting impact. "This letter is just one example of the difference each of you is making," Clara continued, her gaze sweeping across the faces on the screen. "When you treat a passenger with empathy, when you take the time to support a colleague, when you show kindness even on the tough days, you're embodying the very spirit of West Air. You're building something incredible." Clara could see the energy in the room shift, a collective sense of pride filling each employee as they realized their roles weren't just jobs, they were contributions to something larger than themselves. "Going forward, I want each of you to know that this is just the beginning," Clara said, her voice strong with conviction. "We'll continue to expand our wellness programs, strengthen our mentorships, and provide even more resources to support your growth and well-being. But most importantly, we'll keep building this community of compassion and respect, one day at a time." As the meeting came to a close, Clara opened the floor for employees to share their thoughts, ideas, and stories. Dozens of people spoke up, some sharing stories of kindness they'd witnessed among colleagues, others expressing gratitude for the support they'd received. Jessica, too, spoke, her voice filled with emotion as she thanked her fellow employees for reigniting her sense of purpose. When the meeting ended, Clara felt a deep, unshakable satisfaction. The ripple effect of empathy and kindness was spreading, creating waves that touched each corner of the company. And the best part was that this transformation was not reliant on any single person. It was a collective movement, an evolving culture that would continue to thrive long after Clara's own journey at West Air. As she stepped away from her desk, Clara realized that the legacy she was building wasn't just a successful airline or a profitable company. It was a community, one where every person mattered, where kindness was part of the job description, and where each journey, both for employees and passengers, was a little brighter, a little more human. In her heart, Clara knew this was what true success looked like. It was not measured by numbers or accolades, but by the smiles, the support, and the shared sense of purpose that filled every terminal, every plane, and every office at West Air. And as long as that spirit endured, Clara's mission was fulfilled.